Well, I guess the problem I have is that paint is a medium.
Paint, you mean paint meaning paint that's got
Like
this
oil
wet?
paint, watercolor, acrylic paint, as a medium, and I'm still associating the medium with the means with the result.
With the results,
Mhm.
yeah. Yeah,
And it seems like
so,
there's lacking a word there.
there's something in, what you're saying is that if it's fluid,
Uh-huh.
then we can call it paint.
My mind calls it paint.
Your mind calls it paint.
Uh-huh.
But then if it's not fluid, it is more like drawing. What would you call it?
I call it drawing.
Drawing.
But, you know, I draw in a really layered kind of way. So I might have oil pastel on top of graphite, on top of watercolor that started as a base. I'm not a purist in any medium, but I call almost everything I do drawing.
Uh-huh. Well, maybe, what's the definition of drawing?
For me,
Uh-huh.
or for
Yeah,
anybody.
start with you.
Mark making.
Mark making. And so what's the definition of painting?
Fluid application of a painting medium.
All right, so with your definition of painting, fluid application requires that the medium be fluid in order to be a painting.
Well, that kind of belies what Van Gogh would do with,
Aha!
Seurat would do. So, in other words, I don't know what in the heck I'm talking about. And you haven't helped enlighten me. So, if my friend wants to call the beautiful pastels she does a painting, then, or anybody else, then that's perfectly okay.
Yeah, I don't know that there is a distinction between the two. I think it's a matter of perception. I mean, maybe, you know, we've all got biases that will lean one to the other. For my own work, when I'm working with putting together a piece with pastels, they feel like paint.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
They don't go on, well, drawing doesn't necessarily mean with a point. It could, you know, as you know yourself, it could mean with the side of a piece of materials. But when it feels like paint. It feels, you know, like I'm painting. And so, there, at one point, I think of drawing to draw. I think of drawing sort of literally to draw out of between myself and the image, getting started.
Mm-hmm.
Or not only, I know for some people drawing is their medium,
Mm-hmm.
and then it becomes a broader thing. But for me it becomes, it is more mark making where the image is beginning to develop a life of its own and so on. And for me, it becomes the introduction to painting.
Mm-hmm.
But then I know other people, the drawing is the medium.
Right, yeah.
So I didn't go anywhere with that one, did I?
Well, you just emphasized in my mind that the words drawing and painting don't really define what happens on a surface particularly accurately.
I don't think they define the medium necessarily. I guess that's what I'm saying. I think it's what the artist does
Mm-hmm.
that defines it as a painting or a drawing.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
Well, I wish there were another word.
yeah, I think we do need another one. Why don't you come up with one?
Yeah, right.
How about draw paint?
Draw paint.
Paint draw.
Right. Yeah.
So then, speaking of drawing and painting and other things, how does drawing work into your tapestry?
Good question. My tapestries start with an image that's made somehow. And it might be that I've done a lot of steps of layers of drawn marks, covered by paint, covered by more drawn marks, until I find an image that I want to try to interpret in yarn. Or it might start with a photograph that I've taken that I want to work from. So your question about how does drawing play a role in the tapestry, ultimately I've got to have a line drawing, a contour that I use as the model, called the cartoon, that I put behind the thread that I follow, almost in a way like looking at a coloring book, I guess, or a paint by numbers. So it helps me make my image, helps me find an image.
Helps you draw the image out.
Helps me draw the image out, that's right, draw the image out. But for me, working with fiber medium is more satisfying, personally, more satisfying than working with a drawing or painting medium. I enjoy image making, and I enjoy drawing and painting and using chalk pastels and oil pastels. But those to me are a means to an end, helping me find an image that I want to spend the months of time it's going to take to weave, and knowing, okay, I've made some kinds of color mush here on this surface of paper or canvas, and I'm going to use that as a reference for weaving, but I'm not going to try to slavishly copy what I've been able to create with that other medium, because I don't necessarily have those colors in the yarn, but I use that as a starting point, a jumping off place to make color selection with the yarn.
So it's kind of a sequential progression, it sounds like to me, where you start out with a broad range of ideas, even a broad range of materials, and drawing kind of, pardon the pun, weaves in and out of this broad range of material. They all play a part of pulling the core idea together.
Right. Yeah.
That's
exactly right.
That is beautiful.
And I hadn't really thought about it in that sort of wide and narrowing and narrowing and narrowing sort of sense, but that's exactly what I'm doing with a wide range of ideas, tearing my hair out, excuse me, for a long time, trying to figure out what one of those many ideas do I really want to spend time with, then spending broad amount of time with that fewer group of ideas, until finally it turns into the thing that I'm going to weave, that I'm going to spend 6 months weaving.
Yeah, that was the image I got when you were explaining it to me. It was the broader thing, and as you were explaining, I could just see it coming more and more together. This is it, and so now this is where the real creation. Well, so research, you might call it research of sometimes trial and error.
Yeah, that too.
That's a beautiful process.
Stephen Imony, who's a painter, educator, author, who I've had the fortunate time to have some workshops with, talks about working in flux. And I, once he said that, that really resonated with me. I often thought, before I heard him say that, and appreciated what it meant, that all of this research and floundering, I was calling it, to find images, was a bad thing. And I realized when he was talking about working in flux that it's not a bad thing for me, for my way of working, that's my, I gravitate toward that uncertainty and murkiness, I guess.
That's your process.
It is my process. So I work in flux.
That's your individual, unique process.
Yes, and I am finding freedom to create a painter's roadmap, or a tapestry weaver's roadmap.
I should have said an artist's roadmap.
Yeah, well, it
Really?
is, because, you know, I recommend this book to my students when I'm teaching, and my husband said, "Are you going to take your book with all your Post-it notes in it over?" And I said, "Yeah, I don't want to lose those places, you know. I don't like to mark in my books, but I sure do put Post-it notes in them."
All right, maybe we should have provided Post-it notes along with the book.
Yeah, a little packet of
Little
Post-it notes with
finding freedom, create at the top.
Right.
Something like
right.
that.
So I appreciate this book very much, and it has helped me gel some of the compositional thoughts or wonderings that I've had when I'm composing.
Uh-huh.
Reading through and finding things to try, explore, it's been very helpful, and I appreciate the book.
I'm delighted to hear that. A book of stimulus.
A book of stimulus, right? An art maker's roadmap.
Mm-hmm. Maybe that would be good. Art maker. I like that better than artist anyway.
Yeah.
We should start calling ourselves art maker.
Well, we are makers,
Uh-huh.
but I think, you know, accepting that we're artists and we're just like a scientist is a scientist.
Uh-huh. Important.
Is an important
Uh-huh.
thing.
Really important. Yeah. Ah.
So when you're looking for images in the world, and I say in the world because the artwork that I'm familiar with of yours is mostly nature-based, themed. How do you decide do you work in series? Do you work, and you were talking last time we were together about streams and water were often subject, but do you gravitate toward anything in particular? Does it change? How do you know when it's changing?
Over the years, I think what I've gravitated towards has changed more so, not so much in terms of imagery, but in what I look for within the imagery. Because I think we talked about before, for as long as I can remember, I've always gravitated towards water, especially falling water. Just mesmerized by the water itself, and watching it continues to move, and you're contemplating how long the rocks have been there. The rocks have been there like eons, some of them, and the water and the water just keeps flowing. It's different water flowing over the same rock, you know, that sort of thing, and other things too. But what's been drawing me towards images more, and it's not so much that I go out looking for them, as that I see them as I go out. This sort of hit me in the face. The way the light's hitting, what the light is doing to the imagery, I've become more and more fascinated. I think that's probably become obvious in other things I've been doing. More and more fascinated with how the light itself influences how we're seeing the image. And how we're not only seeing, but how we're perceiving it. If it's a direct light, like in the middle of the day, or if it's a direct light in early morning when the light's first coming up, a direct light late in the afternoon, or in different kinds of seasons, different kinds of weather, I become more and more fascinated with that, not only light, but the shadow it creates. And I'm really fascinated with what's going on within the shadow, different kinds of shadows that that light is creating, all the different plays of color, and with color kind of breathes within various shadow areas depending on what the light is doing, and that sort of thing. So there's certain kinds of light that grab me like that this morning. This morning, you're familiar with Kathy Williams' Sunday morning things she does every Sunday on Facebook. Well,
No.
she does this walk. Something captures her. She calls it Sunday morning church.
Oh, nice.
That's right. Yeah. And this morning, she caught light on the tree. It was that early part of the morning when the light's still golden. And when I saw it, it was like my heart goes boom, boom, boom. It's that sort of thing.
Right.
So there's certain kinds of light just stop me cold. And then I just have to do something with it. Did I trail away or did that answer?
No, that answered what's currently capturing.
That's what's currently capturing.
Capturing,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
capturing your interest
Mhm.
and your, that heartbeat, that speeding up or that kind
Uh-huh.
of
Uh-huh.
thing is something that I try to pay attention to.
It's important.
Mhm.
It's important to pay attention because that's where we are. That's
Mhm.
us. That's us right there.
Mhm.
Whatever it is that causes us to stop,
Right.
that's where we are.
So in saying that, do you find that there comes a time when it's time to stop with that subject? That you've, for the time being, used up your energy or your ideas or your desire to explore that subject anymore?
I think if I find myself trying to repeat myself, it's time to stop.
And in what way would you be repeating? Do you
So let me say that in another way. If I find myself so intrigued in what I've done that I want to keep repeating what I've done,
Mm-hmm.
rather than continuing to discover,
Mm-hmm.
or rather than continuing to move forward, I want to stay right there because that feels like success.
Okay.
And so if I just keep repeating that, the way that worked, what colors did I use there? How did it make those colors work? That light's coming, that's really, you reach, there are works that feel like highlights, no pun intended.
Yeah.
But where you feel, man, I like what I did.
Mm-hmm.
And so then the temptation is to want to do that again and again and again. But backing up, that doesn't really answer the question. The question is, the place where it's time to add to, or look beyond. Not necessarily jump to another subject,
Mm-hmm.
but look some more,
Mm-hmm.
is when I start wanting to repeat myself.
Mm-hmm.
And not necessarily do the same subject over and over again, but do that same kind of thing. Because what happens there, I stop looking at the stimulus and start imitating what I've already done.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where a lot of people get, they just dry up. I think you can dry up, and because success can be a threatening thing.
Mm-hmm.
So if you just keep repeating the same old thing over and over again, you're spinning tires, you're bound to get stuck. And so that, and sometimes it's hard to catch.
Mm-hmm.
But when that happens, it's time to say, okay, let's go somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go look again. Let's go somewhere else. But sometimes then, where in my own work, I find myself not necessarily not stopping or catching myself doing that. So that has happened, that kind of thing. But being just sort of noticing that I'm beginning to notice something else in addition to this, and kind of moving towards that something else I noticed in addition to this. And things kind of evolve, or kind of open up like a flower.
Mm-hmm.
Just eat, and then a little bit more gets added to that, and that gets to be very complex. And then that's sort of.
Mm-hmm.
Did I put you to sleep on that one?
No, no, I'm fascinated with the thought of that, and there's value in repeating an approach to an image.
Yeah.
But there's also the danger, like you're saying, of getting so enamored with the way you approach the image that's what you're responding to instead of the
Instead of
itself.
from the bottom up.
Yeah.
The process. I think the process is very important. I think that the process. We should not. That's not what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Each of us has our own process of what happens when we see an image and then where we go from there. Blah blah blah. Okay, that's our internal process. That's what causes things to go. It's like the way babies are made. You know, it's the process. They can't, well, they do, we mess around with it, but anyway. But I'm talking about with the results, and you're saying it. I'm talking about getting stuck on the results and wanting to repeat the results. And then the process kind of gets lost. Because when you don't not doing the process anymore, it's not evolving anymore.
Right.
It's just a repetition of the results.
Right, yeah. Good.
So, is it time to take a look at some of your tapestries?
Sure.
And let you talk just a little bit about what you've talked about this.
Be happy to talk about. And one of the things I want to point out in a few of them that we didn't talk about the other day is how the concept of composition is used in my images. Although they're fairly simple and straightforward, sometimes they do have a compositional structure that I've thought carefully through.
Well, let's go look at one and
Okay.
let you talk about that.
All right.
You can look at two or three maybe.
Sounds good to me.
Okie dokie. Well, tell me, how do you use the Fibonacci numbers in your design?
Yes.
Yeah, talk about that.
Yeah, I do like to have a starting place for composition, and I have a subject, work with nature, close-ups usually, details quite a lot. But I like to have some starting place for composing with the objects. And very often I use the number of something from the Fibonacci series. So 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 or 8 or 13, and that I don't usually go much farther than the 13. But as I'm working with images, I'm thinking, all right, will it work best if I use 5 or 1? In this case, this composition started with a painting that I made that had 4 blood roots in it. And 4 was bothering me because that's not one in the Fibonacci number. So I worked with 3 for a while. I literally often photograph my image and then I can cut it up if I want to. So I had a painting, did a photograph, took one out of it, and I thought, well, I don't like it with 3, so I wound up with 2 in this case. So 2 being one of the Fibonacci numbers. And it seemed compositionally more pleasing. Of the composition, if you can imagine, it was about this wide originally with those other plants included. But these 2 seem to be having a bit of a conversation within the bigger composition. So by eliminating everything but those 2, it really focused on what was better, I thought, about the image in the long run. I was talking, these are blood roots, and you know, they're quite tiny. They come up.
Oh, that's right,
in
those
the
tiny little
spring.
things at the bottom of
They're
the forest.
yay big. So the little blood root itself would be about so big. I like to enlarge images from the natural forms that I work with, sometimes quite a bit larger than what they are originally, because it's like these secret little gems. And I was talking to a friend of mine, Noel, about designing with the blood root, and she said, and the design I was showing her, they were shown quite large. She said, you know, those plants are quite secret little things in the forest. And I thought, yeah, they are, aren't they? So that's why the title of the piece is called Secrets.
Secrets.
Yeah. So that was one use of Fibonacci.
You know, I think it's fascinating too, because there's this myth that you must have three of these, or you know, unequal numbers.
Yeah.
And you've proven that wrong. I love proving myths wrong.
Well, you could think of it as here's one and here's one.
There you go.
So then you've got
So, and now, yeah.
And now you have the 2. Another thing in this too is that I was trying to compose it in such a way so that the focal point is out of the center.
Mm-hmm.
It's in the upper, sort of upper third of the rectangle.
Yeah, it's sort of, it's almost like a rebatment.
Uh-huh.
It's rebatment.
Yeah. But in all of this area, I was trying to make it low in value,
Mm-hmm.
similar in value,
Mm-hmm.
but with enough interest within it so that one's eye just didn't see this brownish.
Right, but
dark.
they have some place to go too.
Yeah.
And I see you pulled the green down there,
Yeah.
and you've got a little bit of the green, the yellow green at the top
Right.
there. And so the
Yeah.
eye just sort of automatically flows through, even though you got the strong contrast with those two. That's a lovely design.
Thank you.
So, what about another design that where you've used the Fibonacci numbers, but maybe in a different way?
Yeah, right behind you is one.
All right.
But, Diane, you were asking about another example of Fibonacci.
That's right, yeah.
And so this is a piece that I've consciously used a certain number of items in. I've used, how many?
8.
Yes, I've used 8.
Very good. Of different sizes.
Yes, 8 of different sizes. So this piece, as well as another one on the other end of the hall, these were designed at residency time at the Lillian E. Smith Center, up on the mountain near Screamer Mountain in Clayton.
Yeah.
And that 2 weeks' time, every day when I walked, I would pick up leaves
Uh-huh.
and take them into the studio and pin them up with a push pin. And I had an opportunity then to look at the leaf and respond to the leaf. One of the artists whose work I really admire is Katz. And I like the really oversized view of the world and things in the world that he puts into these gigantic mural-sized paintings, almost mural-sized paintings. So when I look at natural forms, these small little leaf things that I find on the ground, I like to think about blowing them up, enlarging them beyond their scale so that I can celebrate the shapes, celebrate the bites and the tears and the shadows that they cast. And so I would pin the leaves up, and I have large unstretched canvas and just start drawing and painting.
Drawing, here we go.
And wiping out what I'd done and going back on top. And I like to draw with charcoal
Mhm.
and then spritz it with water to make it run.
Mhm.
And then maybe go back over it with gesso and then draw again. Not trying to copy the lines that were underneath, but those lines that are underneath kind of continue to show. And so backgrounds in pieces like this, I really want to emphasize the shadow, but very often the kind of irregular quality in the background is me trying to echo that image that's partly there in the original.
When you were evolving the design.
Right, when I was working in flux
to
get that design evolved. One of the things that I really enjoyed about doing this is I've used natural dyes of color in this, except for the white and the gray. Those were commercially dyed, but this is madder, dyed with madder root. The yellows were dyed, or yellow oranges were dyed with Osage orange. Osage orange here. Some of the more blue sorts of red were cochineal, which is a insect that comes from a cactus. It's one of the sources of red. That was one of the treasures the Spaniards found in the New World, in fact, not only the gold, but also the source of a beautiful red color, the cochineal bug. So anyway, this is natural dyed, blues from indigo, greens from top dyeing indigo over the yellows.
Are those, some of those you create yourself, or are you getting them from?
Yeah, I dyed them myself.
You did, and did you make the dyes? Some of the dyes you make, some you don't, some you
Yeah.
get from other places.
Yeah, I got the dye powders
Uh-huh,
from a natural dye,
Right.
dye source,
Yeah.
dye source. Some of the dyes, one of the pieces down the hall is dyed with, has a lot of black walnut dye. And
Oh, yeah.
I picked those up in the yard and cooked them and dyed with those.
do you find a sense of, do you find a different sense of, I guess, in touchness, if there is such thing, with your work when you've gone through the process of dyeing your colors and so
Yeah,
on, than when you get them commercially?
A bit more, although I don't mind using commercially dyed colors. I've done it for many years. But there is that total connectedness almost with the image if I've taken the time to dye the yarn that goes into it too. I don't always give myself that time because it takes time.
Mhm.
You know, I've got limited amount of time to weave tapestries. I don't have necessarily a whole bunch of time to do all the dyeing that I do
Right.
for
yeah.
those tapestries.
But I guess it's like cooking homemade meal from scratch, or
Right.
with versus some of the ingredients being prepared. There's this kind of little extra, I did that too,
Yeah.
sort of thing.
Yeah, even if nobody else knows it.
You do, and
I
you
do.
feel more.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that is that.
All right. And this piece beside it here,
Right.
You did that at the Lillian Smith Center.
I did.
didn't you?
I did.
No.
Lillian Smith Center is a residency center that's near Clayton. It's only about maybe a mile and a half from downtown Clayton. And Lillian Smith was a woman who was a civil rights and social justice advocate, 20th century, writing, and her family in early 2000, the girls' camp that Lillian Smith ran for many years, the property where the girls' camp, Laurel Falls Girls' Camp, was turned into an artist residency center by the family of Lillian Smith in 2000. In about 2014 or 15, Piedmont College now owns the property and runs the center. Still offers artist residencies as well as having classes come and use the property, the wooded property there, for lots of reasons. But this was based on a photograph that I'd taken of the chimney, the old chimney ruin at the center. Lillian Smith is buried beside of it, this old chimney ruin. So I took loads of photographs of the stone chimney, and then did a painting, and then did the weaving based on the painting. And the weaving is called Because of Memory. And you were talking about stones and the eons that stones go through. Stones, to me, hold memory. And but I use the title Because of Memory because her burial plaque, her grave is there, and the plaque that's on her grave marker has a quote from one of her writings. It says, "Death can kill a man. That's all it can do to him. It cannot end his life because of memory."
Because of memory.
Because of memory. So, Because of Memory became the title.
Perfect for it.
Of that.
Lovely piece.
Thank you. It's probably the largest piece I've ever woven. I'm not even quite sure the size of it. I know it's no wider than 60 inches wide. Because
I love it that you
width
don't
of
know.
my biggest one. But I think it may be about 72 inches long.
Yeah, yeah, and I see in that one the echoes of everything else that you've been talking about.
Well, it has dark and light contrast. I have not counted the stones that are in there, but if you counted, you might find.
I bet you find some Fibonacci
You might find
numbers.
some Fibonacci, but it. I don't know, the Fibonacci is using Fibonacci numbers is like a scaffold for me. It hangs the other things. It's where I can hang the other things.
Yeah, and you can depend upon it because it's so in tune with nature.
Yeah.
It's so representative of nature.
Right.
All right.
Diane, I love your paintings. These especially really capture my eye. And one of the things I love about each of those is that they're intimate views of these streams with these windows through to the sky. And how did you choose to look at each of those scenes in such a way that you've placed that sky?
You mean so that the sky comes through?
Yeah, the sky comes through. It's not just smack dab in the middle. It's to the right, or it's sort of to the central and left, and the one that's on the left. But the sky and the water are so important in each of those.
Well, it all goes back to the whole light thing. That the sky, we always think of the sunlight as being a primary source of light. But actually the sky is a secondary source of light. And the sky, the colors of the sky influence as much what the light in shadow patterns are doing, sometimes more so than the direct light of the sun. The direct light of the sun will cause the shadows and cause the light patterns. But a lot of times the real color effects are coming from the sky, those rays that are of color that are bouncing from the sky. But they're not always visible, and you really have to kind of squint to see them, feel them more than squint. But what happens is, I'll start with that basic light and shadow, or what's in shadow, what's not in shadow, idea, and with some sort of a path. That's the sky part will start towards the beginning of the painting. But these parts of the sky happen towards the end of the painting. So everything else gets in, and then they sort of ask me, tell me where to put them. It's sort of a matter of how, what needs to come through, what you call them windows, and I like that. Little windows through the forest. A lot of times when people look through the trees, they don't see the sky, but there's a lot of sky. In the summertime, of course they do it in the wintertime because there's no foliage, but in the summertime when the foliage is really, really thick, there's a lot of sky coming through.
Right, yeah.
But a lot of times people are focusing on the trees, they don't actually see the sky. And so I'm saying here, yeah, I'm here too. I'm really a part of this whole thing, sort of, So did that answer?
Yeah, and it really shows up in the other two. Especially that one in the center, how those tiny little windows, it's almost like stained glass, it's almost like the limbs and the trunks are enclosing these blue gems.
Yeah, that also helps to do with where those things go. I said, all this part right in here didn't happen in the beginning. It was not. I'm looking at the big picture in the beginning, and then as the painting begins to sort of tell me where it wants to go, that's when the small things go in. Well, that ends up being a pattern. Well, you see the light coming through here, but the pieces of sky that go in here end up being a pattern that kind of pulls your eye around, so that you're sort of moving as kind of a backwards sea path. So if we had to talk about a structural function, that's not very romantic to talk about. But what are they doing? What are they causing you to do?
Right.
Well, they're causing you to flow through the painting. But in the painting, they act as kind of little back windows that they're causing us to feel the brilliance of the oranges, because they're complements of orange. But they're also coming through, and they're actually providing light for the painting. And well, these are too, but because this has the light here and here, this is a late in the afternoon, sun's going down, obviously, when the sun's casting that golden light on things. And so part of what these are doing, in addition to the other stuff, is they're giving light to the painting.
So then, if this is late afternoon, is the one that's on the right early morning, or is that late
That's
afternoon?
the afternoon too.
Late afternoon
Yeah.
as well?
Yeah.
Lower light?
Yeah, it's a different kind of light. That's the thing so fascinating to me about light. I was talking about that earlier.
Right.
Is that you can't depend on sun. A lot of times, late in the afternoon, the light's going to be that golden light. And this was more in the fall, so the light has a tendency to be more golden in the fall. But in the midsummer, or early spring to midsummer, we don't see that golden light quite so much, especially when early summer to, like I said, mid-spring, early summer, when all the color, when everything is green and there's no more color, we'll notice it. Well, not always, but many times we'll see the light that tends to be, loses the gold, the late afternoon light, and then we begin to see it a little cooler. So that's what I get over here. Yeah, that's, I forgot the question.
Well, the quality of the light.
Oh, the quality of the light, yeah.
That being, I'd ask, was it morning, and you said later afternoon?
Isn't that interesting that in a painting you can't really show whether it's morning or late afternoon? There'll be people who tell you can, but I don't think they're right.
Well, you definitely can see it's a low light.
You know it's low light.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, and that low light.
Low in that it's
Yeah.
angled low.
That really low light is, has been, some time now, 2 or 3 years I guess, has been the light that's been drawing me in. It's been the light that I've been more fascinated by. The low, what happens that time late afternoon, in the morning too, it's two different things. In the morning you have to start it early and it begins to add to itself.
Yeah.
And late in the afternoon, then it begins to kind of subtract from itself.
That's a really great way to look at it.
So, but when you're capturing a single moment, such as this is, then you don't know whether you're going out or in.
So with each of those, would those have started with the small no-tan?
Oh Lord, yes. Yes, every single one, you can count on it, every single painting is going to start with that small no-tan. So the first thing I'm conscious of or want to know is how that light and shadow designs itself. Yes, how does it compose itself as light weaving into shadow? So the no-tan would have been a dark single value area that has coming, it's this whole area, this entire area here is in shadow. Even this is in shadow. We have some little sparkles of light coming through the entire area. So we have an L shape, an L path, an L shape of shadow here. And then we have some minor shallow shadows in here. But the major path is that L shape of shadows and this sort of rectangular shape of light. So that's how the no-tan started out.
So would you have done several versions of that? Like maybe shifting your L further one way or the other before you decide?
Yes. Yeah, I would have done several versions, not only shifting the L, but shifting the light. Because some of them would have been done before the light had gone down, before the sun had gone down quite this much. So I like to do that. That's why I think that's one thing that's interesting about working late in the afternoon, because then I can sit, capture, get myself located in an area and sort of say, okay, this is sort of what I'm looking at, and then do little no-tans. And little no-tans are about an inch by inch and a half. I mean, I'll have I'll have them in my sketchbook, and I'll have the first one, and I'll just say, okay, I'll just put the no-tan down of whatever that pattern happens to be. And by the time that no-tan is finished, the light will have already changed. So I go to the next one, and the next one. Sometimes there might be a dozen no-tans showing the progression of the light, and there'll be one. And in between those, I will also be snapping shots so that I can get all the shapes in that composition. And so there'll be one And I'll play around with those too in larger drawings before I actually start the painting.
So then you'll take all that information, all that research you were doing the no-tan, snapping the shots, back into your studio, and then work with larger drawing, one or two or more before you get to the painting?
Yeah, I will often take color notations. I'll often make color notes. There's sometimes when I might do, it depends. When the light's going this fast, you can't do a lot of painting because it changes so fast. But I'll make color notes of particular colors that I see doing certain things. So I know the camera's not going to catch because the camera's going to deprive me of all these wonderful color variations.
Yeah.
So I'll make color notes just to kind of tell myself which way they're going. So when I go back into the studio, and sometimes I will record on the camera, I'll record the sounds of the river.
Oh,
Because it helps too.
Yeah.
So, and when I go back into the studio then, I might do little gouache studies. I like gouache because it works very much the same as oil. And so in my sketchbook, I might do quick gouache studies where I'm choosing certain ones of those no-tans and exploring the color. Exploring the color and the color relationships. Which way is the color going to move here? What kind of color relationship? Just exploring, open-ended, not knowing, but just exploring possibilities until I begin to feel, okay, this is the direction I want to go. But I do not completely solve the problem with the gouache studies. It will reach a point where I can see, okay, I know this is the direction to go. I know this is the light shadow pattern that's going to do the job. And I'll usually, if I go any further, if I really try to make a painting out of these little studies, then it's all gone. You forget it. There's nothing left.
So you're doing the final resolution, your final solving of the problem happens when you're making the painting.
Right here.
And so that painting might take you 3 hours to do, 3 days to do. But you've added on to it. I mean, it comes as the culmination of those many hours of looking and studying and
It comes as a combination of all of that. Yeah. The way it usually happens is I'll spend maybe 3 to 5 hours at the easel simply blocking in and shifting colors around. And I might not during that time, I might or might not have some specific, like the tree trunks and the rocks, they may or may not be placed in during those times. But and there's sometimes 3 hours, sometimes maybe 5 hours. It could happen within an hour. It all depends on what's happening. And so I never know. But my favorite part is the part that comes next, what I call living with it. When then I take a break from it, maybe go for a walk in the woods or do something. And when I come back to it, that's when I start living with it. And sometimes, so my studio is right in the middle. I live in my studio. So I'm walking past my easel all the time. And oftentimes I might be hidden someplace and I stop and I will pick up the brush and I'll be spending time there until maybe that thought is finished, and then I'll move along. So I have to live with it, which is why full plein air painting doesn't work with me, because it evolves over time. But then there will be another painting session, where then the next phase of imagery in that relationship of light and color within the shadows and not shadow areas, where that starts working. So after that, it's a combination of sessions of painting and what I call living with it.
So are you living with several at once, or is one the only one?
Usually it's one. Usually I'm living with one. I may have other ideas going on in the sketchbook, but I can only focus on one at a time. So usually it's on one. And sometimes on one I could get stuck I'll go back to my sketchbook with gouache and play with ideas and so on. And as far as over a period of time, that might go on, it could go on for a week, it might go on for 2 weeks. And there have been times when I've poured one out a year later and something needs to be emphasized or something. You're not repainting something, just spotting something that needs to be emphasized in some way or another. Usually not beyond, that doesn't happen very often. But usually within about a week's time, the painting pretty much has said what it's going to say. It's time to move on to the next one.
So these three are the same size, essentially. Would they have been done in the same year? It's the same season?
Actually, these were done, there were lots of other paintings in between these. So actually that one was done in 2012.
On the far left.
But then this one was done 2018. This one was done the previous year. So there's lots of things, a lot of other paintings that are going on in between those three. These just happen to be hung together.
But they work. I mean,
they work together.
They're like you're walking through the forest, and throughout the day, here you are seeing different aspects of that. Now, one thing that interests me, it looks like you're standing in the river right there. Were you standing in the river?
I was in a canoe.
Oh, okay. You were in the river.
I was in the river. I was in a canoe.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. This is a really interesting story behind it too, kind of reminiscent of your stone chimney, but in a different way. The Tugelo River was submerged with Lake Hartwell. When they built that lake? Back in the 60s, I guess?
50s.
50s? Back in the 50s, yeah. So that
Late
was,
50s.
yeah. So most areas, major areas of the Tugelo River have been submerged by Lake Hartwell all those years. Well then, which year was it? Maybe, I can't remember. It's been about 5 years ago. There was 4 years ago maybe. During a period of time involving one full summer, they let all the water down in Lake Hartwell, and the river appeared again.
Oh, wow.
And there were stumps that had been there, submerged there for all these 70 years, I don't know. And during that time, a couple of my friends who owned a canoe took me down the entire river.
Wow.
And we started intentionally. We started about 3 in the afternoon, so we could have time to catch the sun. And so we were this is one of those sections that's not there now, because they let the lake back up, and all this that you see right here, probably up to about, I don't know how, probably the trees too. All that's under the lake now.
See, that's with these, all of your paintings really, but these especially, they're timeless.
Timeless.
It's like it could have been 200 years ago, 2,000 years ago, that light and that water and those trees were as they are in your paintings.
Yeah, it's like a piece of music.
Yeah.
It's timeless. Once the tune is created, as long as the tune is passed down, it's timeless. Well, same as with your work too.
The artist, the visual artist, I think, is capturing in our world things that we don't necessarily remember well in our day-to-day life.
In our day-to-day life, they're reminders.
They're reminders, and if we take time to stop and look at as an artist, as you have, and put down on a canvas reminders, and if me or anybody else as a viewer takes the time to stop and look at what you've shown me or anybody else, then we've got the connection with that timelessness.
Isn't that something?
That's amazing.
I wonder if that's maybe one of the definitions of eternity.
Maybe.
Who knows?
Who knows?